The parole board on three occasions said he was unrepentant, he still showed signs of violence, he was not safe to release. But at the two-thirds point, he was released automatically. And that's the issue we should be thinking about, not the, in my view, entirely peripheral one of whether he could be deported.
The Home Office is trying to find a way of deporting Shabir Ahmed to Pakistan. He was the ringleader of a Rochdale grooming gang and was convicted of multiple rapes and spent years in prison. But whether he remains in the UK or is sent to the country of his birth is perhaps not the discussion to be having. So Dominic Lawson is writing about a slightly different take on this for the Sunday Times tomorrow, and he joins us now to discuss it. Dominic, good morning.
Good morning to you.
So yes, deportation has been the word that has been associated with this man and this case and this controversy. But you've actually focused on his sentence and the fact that he is out of prison at this point.
Yes, that's right. Well, just to address primarily the deportation, I mean, he came to this country as a child. The law, as it stands, prevents him from being deported. He's renounced his Pakistani citizenship, and the Pakistanis are saying, in my view, quite reasonably, this is your problem. It's the British government to decide what to do with him, not us. So to me, what is really the scandal is that he's out at all, whether he was free here or in Pakistan. And it stems from the laws on sentencing, which say that any prisoner other than one serving a life sentence is released automatically after serving two-thirds of his or her sentence. And so what happened was, he was eligible for parole halfway through his sentence. The parole board on three occasions said he was unrepentant, he still showed signs of violence, he was not safe to release. But at the two-thirds point, he was released automatically. And that's the issue we should be thinking about, not the, in my view, entirely peripheral one of whether he could be deported.
Yeah. And you make the point in your writing, Dominic, that actually this might be a situation whereby the legislation hasn't actually kept up with the realities, because at the time there was concerns about prison capacity and whether that would be exceeded. Now, those similar concerns do exist today, although there were changes made to the legislation on early release in the meantime.
Yes, I mean, actually, yes. So under the 2003 Act, he would have been released after just halfway through his sentence. But the Conservatives tightened it up in 2020. But your point about prison capacity, of course, is very current, because the present government has had waves of early release of 40 people at 40% of their sentences. And now they're about to have another wave in which even those who've been convicted of crimes such as rape will be released after 40% of their sentences. Now, to be fair to the Labour government, they say, and it's true, that when they came in, the estate was fit to bursting and they had an emergency on their hands, as indeed they do. But nonetheless, it's obviously horrifying to the public and clearly also to the victims of some of these crimes that their assailants, that these often very violent people, are automatically released after 40% of their terms. And this is the wider problem we have to address. I said not the particularity of Ahmed, because he is only in a kind of an extreme version of a very severe, widespread problem.
Yeah. And I suppose we have to question what the solution to this is, because there hasn't been a dramatic increase in prison capacity. And so holding people in for longer is potentially actually quite a difficult thing to do. So is there any way that we can work our way through this with legislation that would avoid this level of concern about perpetrators such as this?
Well, I would first preface it by saying, in fact, the last Conservative government had the biggest ever prison building program. They created 13,000 new places. Unfortunately, because the prison estate is so dilapidated, almost the same number were closed. And so, for example, Dartmoor was closed because the health and safety executive said that radon was too high. I mean, I think it was actually farcical, but nonetheless, the government were compelled to close Dartmoor prison. I suppose one possibility is partly it's a question of money, and it's very hard to build spanking new prisons, is if there was some kind of dormitory system in which people could be kept in secure accommodation that would be a lot cheaper, and which some of the, if you like, the lower level offenders who still had time to serve could be in. So something akin to an open prison, but much less expensive and much easier to get done than these sort of super prisons which the Conservatives were building. And by the way, you could imagine it's very hard to get local approval because people don't want to live next to a new prison or anywhere near it. And so there's always huge local opposition to it. So it's politically not easy. But clearly, you know, the idea that someone like this should be released, even after the parole board, as I said, on 3 occasions said it was not safe, is highly disturbing. But this is actually his right, his absolute right, under the law as it stands.
I'm interested as well to pick up on one of the other nuances you highlight, Dominic, which is that actually he was given another sentence, but he was allowed for that sentence to run concurrently rather than being added on to his original sentence.
Yes.
And had that been the case, he would actually have been in prison until the age of 100. Just talk us through that nuance of this particular story too.
It's very interesting because very few people seem to be aware of this. But actually, during the trial of the Rochdale rape gang, his name was not mentioned at all publicly. And the reason was he faced an immediate second trial for the rape over 10 years. There were 30 specimen counts of rape against what was described as an Asian girl, someone from his community. And the judge in that case gave him 22 years. He'd been given 19 years for his role in the Rochdale rape gangs. And the judge, who's Judge Kochar, said that it would run concurrently, which meant in effect he served only 2 years in practice extra for this abominable campaign of rape against someone within his own community. However, under English law, there is this thing called totality, which means you have to look at it as a whole. And had the sentences run consecutively, as you say, had he served his full term, he would have been in till the age of 100, assuming he lived so long. And I do think it is slightly odd, in my view. I'm always reluctant to criticize judges who have a very difficult job. But it seems to me these cases were not related, they were not connected, they were separate, and there would have been a strong argument for him to be given consecutive sentences. By the way, he would undoubtedly have appealed, and he may have won on appeal. So I don't know what would have happened, but it strikes me as odd that this was not at least tried.
Yes, I think that's a fascinating part. And as you say, I don't think that's been discussed really at all in the coverage thus far. And that in itself is the reason that we like to speak to you, Dominic. You provoke our thoughts in new ways at the weekend, and we're very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is Dominic Lawson, who you can read writing about all of this for the Sunday Times tomorrow. He articulates his arguments so clearly, so well, and with fresh approaches as well, crucially. So you can read Dominic Lawson coming tomorrow in the Sunday Times. The other point to make on consecutive sentences, they are a feature of the US system, and so you do get kind of cases where people are serving sort of thousands of years in prison in theory, but it makes the point, doesn't it, of the seriousness of their crimes and therefore the lack of option they have for early release, which Dominic cites and argues in his column tomorrow. Subscribe now at thetimes.com.